Hello, this is Molefi Kete Asante. I am the president of the Molefi Kete Asante Institute in Philadelphia. We are an African think tank, one of the first in the U.S. That is, we always say an independent African think tank. And we are very delighted to inaugurate with this particular interview the Molefi Kete Asante interviews with great and outstanding thinkers. We're very fortunate today to start this series, which will be broadcast throughout the world, with one of the most incredible thinkers that I think I have ever met. And this is Edgar J. Ridley, who is the chairman of Edgar J. Ridley and Associates, but he's an expert on symbolic behavior and its impact on culture around the world. He's studied and done research on this. He's worked with outstanding scholars such as Sheikh Anta Diop at IFAN. He has also not only been exposed to that and worked with him and culminated his own research with the work called the Neurological Mid-Adventure of Primordial Man. This in itself is an incredible study. And he has spent many years uh, not just as a corporate consultant or national consultant, but he, of course, was also in the military, in the Marines. He is a person who has worked for the World Council of Churches. He has been one of the key people, early people who worked with the Temple University Community Mental Health Center as a senior psychotherapist. Uh, Edgar J. Ridley is, in fact, what we might call one of the purest organic thinkers that we have today. He founded his own organization. International management was his big field, and he's done incredible work through that and produced a concept that it's been called symptomatic thought process. And this whole idea of the symptomatic thought process has gained relevance throughout the world. He has demonstrated it in many places in Asia and in Africa and in the United States. And his management concept has been very effective. And so we're very happy to have him. He's an author, very well-known author. He has authored the books An African Answer, The Key to Global Productivity, Symbolism Revisited, Notes on the Symptomatic Thought Process, and the three-volume series, The Golden Apple, Changing the Structure of Civilization, and the other titles, the masterpiece, The Golden Apple, uh, Changing the Structure of Civilization, and Anthology. It's a very major work because he's put together many things that are significant and important to us. So he's a major thinker. He's not. I mean, we call him the first in this series because, in a sense, the MKA Institute has always been looking for people who have unusual ideas. As you may know, we started with the notion of Afrocentricity, that is, the notion of Africans as agents and the agency of African people in every phenomena. And now we are so happy to start this series with Edgar Ridley, whose work has been recognized uh, actually from boardrooms to the White House. He has garnered much recognition and many awards. He is the recipient of the Carter G. Woodson Award for Scholarship, multiple United Nations high-level summit awards, and he has received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Joseph Biden. He was recently inducted into the inaugural cohort of the Black Authors Hall of Fame. This is a major, major man, and we really appreciate his time and the fact that he's allowed us this time to interview him. And we have a few questions we're going to ask him. And then after he answers those questions, we have one final question that we're going to ask his very dynamic wife, Dr. Linda Ridley, who is a professor at City College in New York. She herself is a scholar, an independent thinker herself, and is also one of the champions of the symptomatic thought process. Um, uh, Edgar J. Ridley uh, actually lectures at colleges and universities worldwide, and his works are widely known. He's done many works in terms of managing diversity in a global economy. I mean, so I don't know, I don't have to say much more about this great man, but I will let him talk to us by saying this. The American educator John Dewey, once stated, a solution was found when symbols came into existence. That the invention of symbols is doubtless by far the greatest single event in the history of man. Without them, no intellectual advance is possible. With them, there is no limit set to intellectual development except inherent stupidity. Wow. Um, uh, I'm going to ask Edgar J. Ridley, what did Dewey mean by that?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that I'm honored to speak at your great institute. There's no doubt that Dr. Asante is one of the greatest intellectual scholars that's existed in the last 300 years. Uh, One of the things I like to say is that the whole that I think needs to be understood and stressed that the whole educational system is built on eugenics. And what we mean by that is that the whole educational system uh, shows and wants to implement the idea that all African people all over the world are inferior. Their educational agenda is built on that they are smarter than us and that they are the leading scientists. And one thing they have done that surpasses everybody is they have told uh, Europeans have told lies about African history. Europeans have told lies about practically every subject that has to do with Africa in a demeaning way.
So you talk about Dewey.
What?
So I wonder how the understanding symbols.
I can't hear what you said. Oh,
Your volume, your mic is off. Dr. Asante, your mic.
I must have muted myself. I was going to ask if if Brother Ridley would just follow up and say when Dewey said that this would be inherent stupidity to us, that there was this question that if we create symbols, there's an inherent stupidity. And I think what I'm hearing is what you're framing is that the whole school of thought around eugenics is part of that stupidity that we have.
Absolutely. One thing that has to be understood is that symbol systems produce mythology. And when we think in a mythical way, we decide in a symbolic way that we are whites are a superior people in every single realm of life. One of the things that I have to say is that we as an African people do not have to depend on the educational thrust of people who classify themselves as white. We One of the things that is so prevalent is the understanding that white people do not see us as fully human individuals. They are so set to see us as inferior and will stay inferior. And that is why we are still in a state of slavery. Our minds are enslaved by whites, and they want that to be a fundamental basic of life for us as feeling inferior. And that has to be understood.
Okay. Well, you've stated, of course, in your work, and I've read this and I've heard you talk about it before, that symbolic thought influences our decisions, society, our religion, our culture, and the perception of ourselves and the world around us. Can you explain a little bit more about how symbolic thought influenced those things?
Yeah, exactly. Symbolism produces mythology and superstition.
Mm,
Of the most superstition geographical areas in the world is Africa and India. India surpasses Africa in terms of being superstition, in terms of their feeling. They even feel more inferior to us. So it has to be made clear that thinking symbolically destroys every avenue of authenticity. Thinking symbolically is a mental illness. When the great scholar, psychiatrist at Harvard Medical School,
Alan Poussin.
Dr. Poussin,
mhm.
asked the American Psychiatric Association to classify racism as a mental illness. And they responded in a very unique way. They stated that they cannot classify racism as a mental illness because it's the norm of American society. That's a very, very sick statement. And that shows you the mental illness of why we think symbolically. We make up stuff. We have great superstition. Superstition destroys our behavior patterns. And let me be clear about this. It's very interesting. It's interesting that uh, if symbol systems, if symbol systems never left Africa, there will be no such thing as racism,
Mm,
no such thing as religion, period.
mm,
Now that
mm,
can be upsetting to a lot of people because initially we are a very religious population, or we think we are a religious population.
mhm,
Point is that we are a very sick population, and
mhm,
that is why we see the problems we have to exist today.
mhm. Thank you very much for that answer. That helps a lot of us to have a better understanding of this. The American Medical Association, as you pointed out, what Alvin Toussaint, the psychiatrist, said, the Harvard psychiatrist, who of course was a very brilliant man. But the AMA stated that racism is a threat to public health. And I think this also is in line with your point about racism being a mental health problem. But many times people say that they don't want racism. I've heard this discussion. They say they don't want racism to be classified as a mental health problem because then, if it's a mental health problem, then white people are not responsible for it. That it is just mental health, and you're not. If you have a mental illness, they say you're not responsible. So that's the one of the debates too. I mean, to say that it's a norm in the American society is also to talk about the impact and the influence of eugenics on everything in education. But I just wonder if the American Medical Association says that racism is a threat to public health. Is that the same thing, or do they mean the same thing, that racism is a threat, or how do you see that?
Well, one of the sad aspects is how racism has affected the health of people all over the world. For instance, uh, President Trump has reneged and gotten out of the World Health Organization.
Yes.
It's the only reason that President Trump opted out of the World Health Organization is that the World Health Organization is run by Ethiopian, a Black African. And for that insane reason, for opting out of the World Health Organization, shows you the sickness of American society and the sickness of, matter of fact, of him. So we have to understand, and a study by African women in California
UCLA.
States
At UCLA.
at UCLA states that whenever a Black person leaves his home, whether it's for real or symbolically, his blood pressure goes up immediately because he feels what he has to face, and what he has to face affects his blood pressure and his heart. And that is one of the reasons that Black people die quicker. Matter of fact, it's been stated that the lifespan of Black people in the United States is the lowest in the world. And let me be clear about this. I've traveled globally in Europe, in Asia. I worked in Asia for over 40 years, 44 years off and on. One thing that we have to understand is that Black people are considered the worst of Homo sapiens in the world, but they treat Black people differently. The leading European scientific textbooks will tell you they think and treat Black people differently than any other Homo sapiens breathing.
But it's a very interesting contradiction, given the fact that that Homo sapiens started in Africa, that the first Homo sapiens are Africans, that before 70,000 years ago, before migration out of Africa, everybody in the world was Black. So it shows you how those people who left Africa in the last 70,000 years have basically flipped the script and are not claiming that the Africans are at the bottom, or that is the way the symbol system has created it. And the mythology has created it that way, so that wherever you go, you see that. And I think it may be evidence of the whole doctrine of white racial superiority being spread around the world.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, if you look at the newest research that white people come up with, they're always coming up with research that they feel proves that indeed African people weren't the first people.
DNA research.
Uh, they want to and even when they admit that all of us came from Africa, they even try to assume that white people are the ones that
Who came from Africa and left, right?
Exactly. They created Egypt. They did all this work coming back from Africa to from Europe to Africa, and they created all the great things that happened in Africa. White people will lie and create situations scientifically that they think proves that indeed Europeans, people classify themselves as white, has led in every discipline and every scientific experiment and every scientific situation. And they have actually lied about that. It's
Well,
amazing how many lies that they have told about not only African people, but what African people have achieved.
yes. Well, we have a very good example in the head of state in the United States, Donald Trump, who has been known and has been recorded as making thousands of inaccurate statements, lies. And in fact, in many recent ways, you hear it, particularly in some of the uh, inane things that he's suggesting and saying about historical evidences. And this is precisely how the symbol systems that have been created by racism appears to me to lead people into stupidity. This is, as Thomas Dewey said, there's a sort of stupidity that comes into this thing, particularly when you have somebody trying to create narratives that are totally false. And Trump is definitely in that category. What would a world free, if you can imagine a world free of symbolism, a world free of mythology and superstition look like? And how can we achieve it?
Absolutely. If I will say that if we retain our behavior of thinking symbolically and superstitiously, the world would not exist as a civilization. It will exist, if it exists at all, as a world of barbarism. And that has to be made clear. And
Mm.
another thing, people, uh, I ask people, do you think Trump got here by magic? Trump didn't get here by magic. America has started out as a racist geographical area.
Right.
Just got his education here and continue on the idea of superiority. That's all. He didn't get here by, and those whites who continually criticize him, they're the same people who created Trump. Be clear about it. He did not get here by magic.
That's right. That is not a magical kind of thing. That he is a product. He's generated by the very mythological narratives that he preaches. And basically, it's the same. I see what you mean. That the nest itself is corrupt, and
Yeah.
out of that nest we get him. That's a wonderful, wonderful answer. Now, before I ask Dr. Linda Ridley to ask last question, I want to ask you another question. How do we use the symptomatic thought process to make effective changes in our behavior?
That is a very, very good question. And Linda, my wife often tells me continuously, she says, Edgar, if you didn't get your education the way you got it, you would never ever think of the kinds of things that you're doing now and the books that you've written. I want to be clear. We as the African people have got to stop depending on white people for our education. We have great scholars, beginning with Dr. Asante, Yusuf Ben-Jukhanan, Cheikh Anta Diop. We have great scholars that we can turn to. I want to be clear about one thing. The only reason I went to Africa is to study under Cheikh Anta Diop at the University of Dakar. The only reason, because to be honest with you, all my family members, the great majority of them have Ivy League education. And when I told them I would go to Africa, they thought I was crazy. What you want to go to Africa for? But why? Because it's what the people classify themselves as white. The lies they have told about Africa, it's very difficult for people to have that opinion. So one of the things that, for instance, one of the greatest jobs that I had besides consulting was working at Temple University as senior psychotherapist at their mental health facilities, helping the people of North Philadelphia. That a wonderful thing, a job that, and I enjoyed that very much. And also, I want to say that my bosses at Temple University were all graduates of Howard University School of Medicine. They allowed me to do my own research. Whites would never do this. They allowed me to do my own research and study the way I wanted to study and gain that knowledge the way I wanted to gain that knowledge. That was a tremendous help because it allowed me to, and what I did at Temple was I would go into the school system of Philadelphia and evaluate the young students from first grade all the way up to the final years of high school. And I was never so happy doing that. To be honest with you, that was the first time that my bosses were African, were Black people. Most of the time, my bosses were Europeans. And I want to say this in terms of religion. I had the fortunate idea of working for the World Council of Churches in Geneva. And what the World Council of Churches did in Geneva was create a very scientific and daring project by producing a program for different cities in the United States. And that program was going into corporate America to study the church's influence on racism and ideas of the inferiority of Black people. It was a unique thing, project ran by Jitsu Morikawa, who was an Asian who worked with Martin Luther King. It was very unique. And the Philadelphia chapter was called the Metropolitan Association of Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Inquirer ran a story about that. I'm very proud to be a part of that. My job was to go into Roman Haas, a corporation, and nobody knew what I was doing at Roman Haas Chemical Company. I was planted there, and to go in there and study what racism has done to the working class and the church involvement in that. So I was very fortunate to be able to participate in something like that. And I was just, fortunate to be at the right time where they heard about me and my work and chose me to work for Metropolitan Association of Philadelphia.
Well, can I go when you finish? I want to follow up with that. Go right ahead and finish. Can I ask you because I wanted to ask because it seems to me you're speaking a lot about the church and so forth, but in terms of symbolic behavior, it seems to me that the church is one of the great producers of symbolic behavior.
Absolutely. There's no.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know whether there was a contradiction in that, but
Yeah. Well, Leonard Barrett, who's one of our great scholars at Temple University, gave this definition of religion. And he was a professor of religion at Temple University, Leonard Barrett. He stated that all religions all religions are symbol systems by which man searches for ultimate reality. That says it all. That says it all. Religion is mythological systems that allow us to be very superstitious in our behavior. They allow us to do everything that we want to do.
I just needed to clarify that. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful, wonderful answer. Dr. Ridley, would you care to ask a question? Because I know y'all are partners in many ways with this, but there may be something you could ask that will help to enlighten us here as well.
Thank you for asking, Dr. Asante. I'm glad to participate. I wanted to share, my experience has been so unique because I've been able to sit at the feet of Edgar and learn that symptomatic behavior and practice that symptomatic thought process. And so even very early on, when I look at my own educational journey, all of my training, I tell everybody that Edgar taught me everything I know. What do I mean
That's
by
good.
that? What do I mean by that?
That's good.
Because when I even considered doing an undergraduate, Edgar was the one who said to me, "You're better than that. You can do an MBA." And I literally enrolled in an MBA program without an undergraduate degree. Who does that? And that is a symptomatic approach. And after earning my MBA degree, I turned around and earned my doctorate degree. And all of that is symptomatic.
Mhm.
I've been able to implement the symptomatic thought process, not only in my education, not only in my dissertation. My dissertation was wrapped around the theory of the symptomatic thought process. I'm actually writing a book right now. And what is my topic? Going back to some earlier conversation the two of you just had, talking about current day, where we are, how African people are treated. I'm looking at the connection between chattel slavery and business and management today. That's my discipline that I teach in, business and management. And it is widely misunderstood that there is a direct link at how people were treated in antebellum slavery and how people are treated today in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So that is my area of study. So I get the opportunity to implement symptomatic thought process daily. In addition, I also need to correct the record. I don't teach at City College. I teach at City University.
To the university. Thank you.
Which is the parent. City University, I teach at different colleges there.
Yes.
I teach, for instance, a graduate program on organizational behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, in a class like that, where you have students who already have graduate degrees and are coming in for a second or a third graduate degree, they can take that symptomatic thought process back to their employers and implement it right away. So we use Edgar's anthology, for instance, in my curriculum. And students learn that immediately. You mentioned earlier, Edgar's work is worldwide because Edgar's books are on many countries on the African continent, as well as throughout Europe. They're using them in the curriculum, as well as with our teams in Spain and Europe, in Malaysia, etc. So I say all of that to say how we are able to put it to work right away. And certainly in our consulting practice, when we train our clients and we look at different approaches to institutional racism, racial perceptions, diversity, equity, and conclusion, all of those elements, the symptomatic thought process is immediately applicable. And we spend a lot of time with that. And so that brings me fast forward to a question I wanted to ask you, Edgar.
Sure.
When we talk about breaking people away from symbolic behavior, what are the ways we can break out of symbol dependency? I gave some examples of what I've tried to do.
I was fortunate enough to have as one of my professors a scholar who wrote a book called the Edward Whitmore is a scholar, And one of the books he wrote was very influential to me and very important in that he stated that the thrust, the symbolic life is the main reason that we have a world of insanity. The Quest for Symbolic Life. Wrote a book, The Quest for Symbolic Life. And that is very interesting because what he is saying that our whole quest in life is to live a symbolic life. Can you imagine? And that is the reason why we are so phony. That's the reason why we make decisions that is disastrous to our lives and civilization. And I guess my biggest thing is, and I have to repeat this over and over again, I made a decision to pick my professors out. I made a decision to do what is authentic and not do what is expected of us, because what is expected of us is to live a symbolic existence. And that accounts for our huge population of mental illness. And be clear that I know it's hard for a lot of people to take, but I'm trying to say to you that do not get feel that you need that white stamp of approval. The vast majority of Black people in the United States, and indeed Africa, is that we need that white stamp of approval. We don't.
And that white stamp of approval is a form of symbolic symbolism.
Absolutely. It's very good, Dr. Son. It's a form of it is symbolic behavior. It's symbolic behavior. And one thing that Edgar Whitmont taught me is that, and in his book, The Symbolic Quest, remember that, the symbolic quest. And I want to be clear about this because this is so important. There's only two possible ways of living and solving the problems in today's world. And those two possible ways are thinking symptomatically and or thinking symbolically. Now, one difference between Edward Whitmont and myself, he thought that thinking symbolically was healthy. And that is why he said his book was The Symbolic Quest. He was right about, he says, the whole of life is one of the symbolic quests. What that tells you, the whole of life is to reach the existential position of insanity. The vast majority of the world is based on symbolic behavior, symbolic thought, and that will eventually destroy us.
Well, there you have it, audience of Molefi Kete Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies. The people listening throughout the African continent, throughout South America, particularly in Brazil. Those of you who are listening in Europe and throughout North America, this has been our inaugural interview with great thinkers. And Edgar J. Ridley has just given us an original new concept that I am sure that all of us will be applying and using and trying to master in the days and months and years to come. I want to thank you, Edgar Ridley, and also Linda Ridley, professor at City University, for sitting with us and sharing with us in this wonderful, very beautiful interview. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sante.
Thank you.
I'm proud to be able to be your speaker. And I want to say over and over again, I'm proud that you are a wonderful, wonderful scholar and who have educated Blacks all over the world about their true history. I'm honored to be the speaker. today. Thank you.
You're very kind, much kind. Thank you so much, my brother. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.